Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather with us tonight. No matter what part of Alaska you're watching from, we encourage you to stay up to date with your weather. And in some cases, that weather has been pretty rough and ugly for the last 24 hours. We'll give you an update here in just a minute. But remember, you can always check if the phones are working. The phone line is on at 1-800-472-0391. You can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska or email me if you have questions. If you can't find what you're looking for or you'd just like an update, I'll help you any way I can to get that information back to you and your village, so just let me know. Let's take a look at what's going on across the region. Up north, we're looking at a lot of red on the map, and that is either a warning of some kind for a winter storm warning or a coastal flood warning, and looks like most of those have been rescinded at this point. So we're talking about winter storm warnings across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. The northern and southern parts of the eastern Brooks Range, the western Brooks Range are under an advisory. And then south of that, this is all winter storm warnings with the exception of the yellow areas here across the Norton Sound region. We're talking about coastal flood advisories. So a couple different things going on here, the winter storm and coastal flooding. Let's talk about the winter weather first. Up north, across the North Slope, this is where the weather really seems to be the worst at this point for snow and wind. Around AKwx, conditions there are just been towing the line of blizzard level there. So as we go through the rest of the evening here, if you see the northern Arctic coast and areas around AKwx get a warning for a blizzard, that's what's going on. It has just been that close. We call this a winter weather advisory for winds that are a little bit slower, snowfall that may be a little bit less, or the duration of all those things combined where it's not quite as bad as what we would call a blizzard. Those are just numbers, though. The effect to you is the visibility is poor, the wind is howling out there, and snow is falling, and it's dangerous to go outside. So no matter what it's called, just be careful and make sure you and your family are being taken care of. Across the north, we expect the snow to continue there. We will see improving conditions probably around noontime tomorrow around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse eastward. That could go a little bit later into the day, at 6 o'clock or so. So watch for conditions to slowly improve from west to east throughout the day. Look further southward toward Arctic Village and Bettles and Ambler. You're looking at the option of about 4 to 6 inches, maybe as much as 8 in some cases there. Winds will be howling, gusts 40 to 50 miles per hour there. And that continues the further south you go into the Seward Peninsula, as well as the northern sections of the Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref, and around toward the Kotzebue Sound region. So snow will continue to fall in those regions, and gradually, slowly, conditions should improve as we get into about late afternoon, 6 p.m. Tonight. So again, improving conditions after tonight. For the Norton Sound region down toward the Yukon Delta, a coastal flood advisory is also in effect. This should improve later tonight as well, but we have gotten reports of flooding around Kotlik there and saw some roof damage and power line damage perhaps around the Amonic area. I know that the crews there, the AKwx crews, have been working hard to keep power on in some of those locations thanks to the wind. So if you have damage to report, please send that up through your village safety patrol officer or contact the National Weather Service in Fairbanks in this case. I'd be happy to receive that information as well at my email, david.snider@noaa.gov, and that helps us be better prepared when we see these conditions shaping up to then warn you further out ahead of time when we know this is what happens when the wind is blowing in this way. So we appreciate that and certainly want everyone to be safe and make sure that you don't go out and take pictures until it is safe to do so. We can wait. Let's take a look at satellite picture for this Tuesday. A pretty broad area of low pressure sweeping across the North Slope here, and a front right here, the leading edge of colder air that's going to be dropping southward here in the next 24 hours. As this continues dropping southward, it will help to slow down the wind and remove some of the snowfall that we've been seeing across the region. But it is going to present more of a wind maker for northern and central parts of southeast as we go ahead into the next couple days. As you would expect, this weather pattern over all of Alaska really isn't changing that much, so we are going to have another wave of warm air work its way up the west coast as we head into Wednesday and Thursday, and behind that another surge of wind coming in behind it. In the meantime, looks like conditions are going to be clearing out for south central as this front moves through. Here's the front now, right around the Brooks Range and up around the Noatak and Kobuk valleys. As this is working its way eastward, we expect to see the milder weather across southeast slowly come to an end. The onshore flow that's been working into Norton Sound and the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula, places like Golovin, Shaktoolik, Unalakleet, all should see improving weather in very near terms. Probably by the end of this evening, conditions will start to improve. Out west, high pressure sitting across the central and western chain, 1,031 millibars there, and you can see an area of low pressure working its way eastward. This is going to bring a little bit of a warm-up to the west coast as we head through tonight and into tomorrow, but again, that little in-between period should be a quieter period for you and your village. Low pressure sitting south and east of Kodiak at 998 millibars. It's going to sit out at sea later tonight. And look for some areas of light snow across the Alaska Range. Up north, though, the crossed arrows indicate blowing snow. And once again, that's at least a winter storm warning, perhaps a winter weather advisory. Those are just names, though. What it means is travel could be tricky, snow is going to be falling, and visibility will be poor. So be very careful if you have to go out. As we get into Wednesday, you can still see those areas of blowing snow and falling snow across the eastern interior. Places like the middle Tanana Valley tonight looking at least a little bit of snow and a winter weather advisory for you. Looks like some of that will be staying out of south central. We'll probably get out with a little bit of wind around the Copper River Valley, through Cook Inlet, over the Shelikof Strait region, and likely gusty conditions across the Alaska Peninsula. And a look out west shows the next weather system already working its way into the North Pacific and the Western Bering at 954 millibars. So wind will be redeveloping out in the west. In the meantime, low pressure that's been bugging everybody out in the west has now moved east, and this is going to help drain the cold air that's coming out of the Yukon, channeling this through the Lynn Canal, probably some of the gaps in southeast, and certainly around Yakutat. So we would expect to see, at least initially Wednesday, some stronger winds out of areas in south central. And as we get into Thursday, this will present a little bit more of a setup for southeastern Alaska to get in on that draw that usually starts to blow when you have low pressure to your south and a really big, cold, high pressure system up across the north at 1,035 millibars. So this is a really good setup for that. Out west on Thursday, here's our 958 low across the western Bering. Once again, deep southerly flow working in through the Bering itself. Maybe a little bit of a drier day for the Pribilovs on Thursday. That could be good news for you, and maybe not quite as windy. The front should be passed, but if there's air travel going from Bethel to St. Paul or Anchorage, it is going to have to get up and over this front, and that is not going to be quite as fun. Look for areas of snow up across the west coast. Low pressure sitting very near Bristol Bay at 1,012 millibars. Generally clear conditions across most of the interior, and that will continue to be the case as we have cold air dropping southward. Take a look at this. Temps in the 15 to about 25 below range tonight for the North Slope. Kotzebue Sound temps anywhere from 10 to 20 below, 12 below in Nome. Low to mid-teens around southwestern Alaska, 20s and 30s for the peninsula, 31 around Kodiak, and 20s and 30s for a good chunk of southeast. Prince William Sound in the mid-20s, Cook Inlet temps in the teens, Middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks 8, up to 14 tomorrow. Looks like anywhere from 5 below to almost 20 below for the North Slope, again with dangerous winter conditions here up across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. 0 in Nome. Looks like around 22 in Bethel, Bristol Bay, King Salmon, Dillingham, just shy of 30, mid to upper 30s for the Alaska Peninsula. And Sandpoint about 35. Dutch Harbor, Unalaska 37, 33 in St. Paul, and mid to upper 30s for southeast. Cordova 34. A low temperature there in the teens as we get into Thursday morning. In the negative teens for the middle Tanana Valley. In fact, 20 to 25 below from Tanana up toward Bettles and Ambler. The North Slope, you're looking at overnight lows from 30 to about 35 below as we get into Thursday morning, not counting a wind chill. Overnight lows in the southwest, single digits to teens around Bristol Bay, 25 around False Pass. As we get into Thursday afternoon, that cold moderates just a little bit. You're looking about 20 to 25 below for daytime highs, 0 in Fairbanks, teens for south central, and 20s and 30s for southwest. Coastal areas around McCormick, 30. You're looking at mid to upper 30s for parts of southeast as that cold sets in. And again, this is going to be a lot of wind working through a good part of southeast as we get through Thursday afternoon. Look out west shows temps in the chain, still holding in the lower 40s. St. Paul 37, 24 around St. Lawrence Island, about 1 for Shishmaref, 4 below in Kotzebue.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to your flying weather now. MVFR conditions are expected to be fairly widespread across the interior and really a large part of the west coast, but we are going to see some dramatic improvements across the Bering and across some of the northern Gulf Coast. As we head into Wednesday morning, watch for IFR from the Chilkoot Pass all the way down toward Juneau and west toward Sitka and Angoon. Southward MVFR for the Clarence Strait and the outer coast for the most part. As we get into the afternoon, a lot of that VFR will spread eastward and north into the Kobuk, Noatak Valleys, the Koyukuk Valley, and west into Norton Sound. But watch for MVFR across the Bering Strait communities into the Yukon Delta and parts of the Kuskokwim Delta just about to Bethel. North and east of that, it should be a little bit better. The next frontal boundary is moving in already, and we expect to see IFR to be fairly widespread ahead of that boundary around Adak and Atka as that moves eastward throughout the day and the night. And upwards around Arctic Village and east toward Old Crow and into the upper parts of the Copper River Valley toward Wrangell St. Elias regions. You're looking at IFR conditions there. MVFR will be widespread across all of southeast with the exception of Yakutat for your Wednesday afternoon. That improves a little bit more, but what that means is outflow winds are coming through and it's going to clear out a lot of that cloud cover, so turbulence will be going up as visibility and ceilings improve for Thursday in southeast. As IFR continues marching eastward through St. Matthew and passing the Pribilovs, watch for conditions to drop for places like Nikolsky, Unalaska, Dutch Harbor, all the way out towards Sand Point. And for the interior, it looks like MVFR will be fairly widespread through the Tanana Valley and the upper Yukon Valley, but west of that and south, things look pretty good throughout your starting positions there on Thursday afternoon. With MVFR in the morning for the North Slope, that pushes off. Look for VFR really for most of the interior and south central, but now with our next front making it into the west coast, the Bering Strait communities, Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas all the way into Bristol Bay, and also the windward side of the Alaska Peninsula in this case, with winds coming in from the south, we'll see diminished ceilings and visibility throughout the day. Most of southeast should still be pretty good, but that still means kind of a gap winds flowing through your area. And out to the west, MVFR. Here's your pass conditions. Improving conditions expected for Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass as we go through your Wednesday. So some good news there, and it looks like that'll hold through Thursday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass also looking for some improvements, at least for Wednesday, and then we'll flip this around for Thursday and see worsening weather as we go. Rainy Pass, IFR conditions there to start, but it looks like some improvements throughout the day. Windy Pass and Isabel Pass, we both expect to see marginal conditions throughout all of your day. Mentasta Pass, looking for marginal weather through most of the day. No big changes either way. And as we get into Tanita Pass, we do expect to see VFR through most of the day. Portage Pass looks pretty good right now. And then as we get over to Chilkoot and White Pass, we said the IFR would start in the morning, MVFR by the afternoon, and probably seeing improving conditions, but worsening turbulence is a factor there as we go into Thursday. So here's your freezing levels. That colder air is pushing southward. You can see the 2,000-foot freezing line hovering well to the south there as the storm track continues pushing its way northward. As we get into our icing concerns, you'll notice the levels here in southeast are above about 4,000 to 6,000 feet for at least some isolated moderate, and there's still some patches of moisture there below 7,000 feet. So this is below around the Alcan border, around Eagle and southward. As you head out to the southwest, we're back into finding that moisture a little bit higher off the ground between 2,000 and 3,000 feet and above 10,000 feet, all ahead of that next wave there for the central and western chain. So certainly some icing concerns, especially in the east. The jet stream has a building ridge now across the Bering Sea and a very pronounced trough across the North Pacific with 150 knots around the west and south side. Across western Alaska, we've got a trough of low pressure now as that colder air is descending. That's pushing that freezing level further and further south. You can see wind speeds there rip-roaring at 125 knots and a little bit of a bump there, a ridge across southeastern Alaska. At 9,000 feet, here's our ridge building once again. You can see that stronger south and westerly winds, 50 to 60 knots there. Northwesterlies at 50 to 55 across the Gulf, feeding into the Gulf with low pressure here building out across the eastern sections of southeast. Light onshore winds, 15 to 20 across the North Slope. Even lighter at 3,000 feet there, 15 to maybe 10 to 15. Our ridge is across the west coast now, and our building trough in the west, 50 to 60 knots, and low pressure sitting across the eastern Gulf, dragging that air offshore. And eventually, as this shifts position, it will start to drag more across some of our favorite passes in southeast. So turbulence concerns for tomorrow, absolutely looking at the potential for at least some isolated severe across the higher terrain in southwest, but even greater threats will be any of our islands and mountainous terrain there out in the west below 4,000 to about 5,000 feet. A little less concern there for the Alaska Range and points eastward with considerable moderate just east of Fairbanks and below 10,000 feet for the Alaska Range. It looks like Kodiak Island will also be under that isolated severe.
On March 11, 2011, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake off the Pacific coast of Japan generated a tsunami. This series of ocean waves sped towards the island nation, with waves reaching 24 feet high. The result was devastation and utter destruction. Towns were engulfed by water and swept away. Farmland was flooded. Tens of thousands of lives were lost. The National Police Agency reported damages to hundreds of roads, bridges, and more than 100,000 buildings. The surging water flooded rivers and destroyed harbors. In some areas along the coast, tsunami waves reached 6 miles inland. Tsunamis not only cause severe damage when they first strike land, but also as the water recedes back to sea. Tsunamis can inflict this type of damage because of some unique features. As tsunami waves travel across ocean basins, they may be as little as a few centimeters high, but they extend down to the ocean floor. This is different than traditional waves, which are only surface features. Tsunamis can also travel hundreds of miles per hour in the open ocean. As these waves approach a coast, the shallowing ocean floor slows the waves down and pushes the water mass upwards. The quicker the ocean floor transitions from deep to shallow, the greater potential for a higher wave height. So, tsunamis that experience this sudden shift into shallow water can have the height and momentum to pack a serious punch. Unfortunately, Japan found itself in this scenario. This image shows how abruptly the Japanese islands rise out of the ocean. Other coastal areas in the region have much more gradual slopes. The earthquake on March 11th was the most powerful known to hit Japan, and the tsunami it created had the necessary ingredients to make it such a deadly and destructive force. "80 miles east of Japan, a 9.0 magnitude earthquake rocks the ocean floor. This disturbance causes a transfer of energy from the seafloor to the ocean, generating a series of ocean waves, known as a tsunami. In about 20 minutes, waves strike the Japanese coastline. Other nations go on high alert because the tsunami will propagate or spread throughout the Pacific Ocean. As the tsunami radiates outward from Japan, it encounters a variety of ocean features, such as ridges and underwater volcanoes, which guide the tsunami and create a complex pattern of scattering and reflective waves. In 8 hours, the waves reach the Hawaiian Islands, and in 9.5 hours, they hit the west coast of the United States. In 16 hours, the tsunami reaches the Indian Ocean and New Zealand, and by 22 hours, the entire Pacific Ocean had been affected. The impact of a tsunami can be highly variable because of the complicated interactions with ocean features and coastline elements. Wave height and speed will differ from place to place. Since tsunamis can be hundreds of miles long and travel thousands of miles away from where they originated, they are considered a worldwide threat when they form. These are the sounds of a tsunami warning. They alert residents that a killer wave is about to strike. These sirens, however, are just a small part of the sophisticated warning systems that played a role in Japan and in the US during the Pacific Ocean tsunami in March 2011. Most tsunamis are generated by an undersea earthquake. Fortunately, Japan has one of the most advanced earthquake early warning systems in the world. It detects tremors, calculates the epicenter, and sends out warnings from over 1,000 seismographs scattered throughout the country. The Japan Meteorological Agency issues the warnings and sends alerts to television and radio channels, the internet, and mobile phone networks. When the earthquake struck 80 miles offshore, warnings were generated in about 3 seconds. The tsunami warnings came 3 minutes later. These take longer because more complex calculations are involved and must factor in ocean data. Since the first tsunami wave struck the coastline within 20 minutes, the advanced warning provided some residents with crucial minutes to reach a safe area. While the earthquake sent powerful tsunami waves westward toward Japan, the tsunami also propagated east into the Pacific Ocean. Here, warnings are issued by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, operated by NOAA in Hawaii. NOAA maintains a large network of buoys with ocean floor sensors that are strategically positioned in the earthquake-prone zones of the Pacific. This system collects vital ocean data for tsunami forecasting. On March 11th, only 25 minutes after the earthquake struck, the first buoy station measured the tsunami and relayed information to Hawaii. Scientists used this data to run models and issue forecasts and warnings to nations throughout the Pacific. From there, local emergency managers decided what actions were appropriate to take for public safety. The earthquake and resulting tsunami devastated the Japanese coastline, causing damage that will take years to repair. While we can't prevent these forces of nature from happening, our early warning systems can help us prepare for the dangers headed our way.
And now, marine weather around Alaska. And back with your marine weather update now. You can see that the consistent southerly winds have pushed a lot of opening into the sea ice here across Norton Sound and north of Etoll Strait and west of the Yukon Delta. A lot of this is open water. It still has some very low concentrations of ice, so we're still calling this marginal ice right now instead of the higher concentration white areas that you see. So be sure that there is plenty of open water there, and the ice conditions will continue to change even as we're getting into some colder weather briefly for a day or two. There's another warmer surge working northward with another one right behind it. So conditions from Norton Sound southward, including St. Lawrence Island, will continue to change, and we expect to see changes here from Shishmaref into the upper end of Kotzebue Sound as well, just south of Kotzebue itself. You can see a little bit of marginal ice there. We do expect ice to expand into Cook Inlet, though, with the next several days of colder weather. So if you are, or your friends are, family, out hunting on the ice, make sure they're being extra careful. There is a lot of open water there right now, and conditions will continue to change just about every day. So make sure you know what you're in for if you're heading out in the water or heading out on the ice. Here's a look at southeast right now. Northerlies coming down the Lynn Canal through Stevens Passage, about 25 knots for your Wednesday. 5-foot seas there, southeasterlies in Clarence Strait, and a little bit more of a south and easterly flow coming out across Sound and up the outer coast there, gust to 35 knots on Wednesday. But Thursday's the big windy day. Remember, we were talking about that pressure gradient setting up here. 30 to 45 knots sustained, gust to 60 in the Lynn Canal, 45 knots in Stevens Passage, and offshore winds across the outer coast, 25 to 35 sustained, with 9 to 16-foot seas there. For Wednesday, look for stronger winds out of Prince William Sound and the Copper River Delta region. You're looking to gust to 45 in that smaller area there, east and south of Cordova. 6 to 7-foot seas in the region. Northerlies coming down Cook Inlet, and a really strong draw across the Barren Islands, 45 to 50 knots sustained. 14 to 16-foot seas on Wednesday. All areas should see some improvement as we go into Thursday there, 25 to 30 in most areas with 7 to about 11-foot seas. Northerlies diminish just a little bit in Cook Inlet, 15 to 20 as we get into Thursday. For Wednesday, the strongest winds across the Ak Pen and Kodiak Island, about 45 to 50 knots there, 10 to 17-foot seas with northwesterlies continuing down the coast, 11-foot seas there north of Cold Bay. As we get into Thursday, winds diminish a little bit as high pressure is moving through briefly, 20 to 35 knots, 12-foot seas east of Kodiak Island, 30 knots inside of Bristol Bay from the east with a 5-foot sea, and southerlies down the coast. Look for 6 to 9-foot seas across the Pacific waters, about 20 to 25 knots there from the west and from the south. For the western chain, looking for a strong draw into that developing and strengthening area of low pressure, 45 to 55 knots there. Just been a rough go across the Aleutians the last week or so. Looking for 19 to 27 foot seas, the highest of which, of course, west of Kiska to about Shimya. Looking at 10 to 11 foot seas across the eastern chain, 25 to 30 there. As we get into Thursday, you can see the flow shifts a little bit more to the west and southwest. You're getting into 25 to 50 knot winds. The strongest still holding out here between Adak and Shemya with 35 to 45 foot seas, the highest of which will be west of Kiska. For Nikolsky to Unalaska, you're looking at about 25 to 30 knots, 8 to 16 foot seas there. And you're saying, what storm? Not too bad out there. Hang out to the east for a little while. Out across the west coast, you're looking at north and easterlies moving out of Norton Sound, so water moving away from the coast now. Westerlies still moving over Etolan Strait and into the Kuskokwim Delta onshore, 25 knots. Southerlies around St. Paul and St. George, down to 11 foot seas there as we get into Thursday. Southerlies pick up once again across the Kuskokwim Delta north of Nunivak Island and again building their way toward Norton Sound, but not yet, 25 to 35 knots. Still some ice there as well. 4 foot seas expected there in Norton Sound as we get into Thursday. For the North Slope, strong westerly winds, 20 to 35. Begin very strong winter storm conditions here across the North Slope, and more of a lighter and variable wind, 10 to 15 knots across the Chukchi Sea and over the ice. That's more of an offshore flow on Thursday. Light south and westerly winds by comparison across the Beaufort Seacoast for your Thursday there. So slight improvements as we get into Wednesday night and Thursday for sure. Let's recap the weather. Colder air is dropping southward. We have very strong winter storm conditions across the Beaufort Seacoast, and sometimes they may approach blizzard levels there, so watch for updates from the National Weather Service in Fairbanks. 6 to 8 inches of snow or more around the Kobuk and Noatak valleys there. Again, dangerous wind with that, and you will see snow around the Tanana Valley southward, maybe as much as 2 to 4 inches. This is all driving southward and will create a windier setup across southeastern Alaska as we get into Wednesday and Thursday. Coastal flood advisories are still posted this evening for parts of Norton Sound and the Yukon Delta. That should be improving later tonight.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.